Happy Tuesday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Not too many changes, but getting a bit of a better idea of our end of the weekend rain chances. That's probably what will be the focal point of your forecast, because throughout the rest of the work week, it is looking like some clear conditions. But we'll go into all the specifics about everything that you need to know, planning out any outdoor activities for the afternoons and evenings, and just going about your normal daily routine. So staying dry and sunny over the course of the midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, and all the way through Thursday. We will have some cool mornings and some warm days, but really just going to be some pleasantly warm days, especially when you factor in how much of that lower humidity is really playing a role in your forecast. Your next rain chance is arriving on Sunday, getting a bit of a better idea of the specific timing of that rain. But in terms of how much, that is still a bit up in the air. So we'll go over the latest update with your long range models. Here's the scene all around the quad here in Central Georgia. Nothing but crystal clear and blue sky as we look off in the distance. Maybe a bit hazy as you look over towards the east here by the Georgia National Fairgrounds. But overall, it is just a crystal clear day, not a single cloud in the sky. So it obviously has resulted in a pretty quick warm up with our temperatures. Here's a look at the current numbers: low 70s, mid 70s, and one lone upper 70, 77 degrees down in Vidalia. This is a good increase from what we've seen already as of this morning. Downtown Macon was actually at 50 degrees flat earlier this morning, has risen about 25 degrees over the course of the last few hours, and we still have a couple hours of warming to go as we go into the afternoon hours. So 77, the warmest number we saw here in Central Georgia. All of our neighboring areas still somewhere in the low 70s, maybe slightly warmer in Panama City, Jacksonville, down to Orlando. Orlando at 80 degrees. That is the only 80-degree value that we do see here in the eastern United States. And now as we're transitioning really into the thick of the fall season, areas farther to the north of us are going to continue to just be slightly cooler as we go throughout this time of the day. 65 in Lexington, 68 in Indianapolis. And of course, you can continue to see all of those wind arrows over there off the Atlantic coast. This is still associated with our coastal low system and the nor'easter that continues to ride up the mid-Atlantic and eventually up into the New England portions of the country, sending its fair share of widespread rain up into areas of the thought I was going to sneeze, excuse me. So up into the mid-Atlantic and up into other portions of, say, coastal New Jersey, coastal New York, and into areas close to Connecticut and Rhode Island. Dew point temperatures. We've gotten a slight increase from this morning. We are seeing a couple values that are into the low 60s. Some of that light green, very faint in color, but overall it continues to be a very dry atmosphere as long as we don't have a more prominent light green shade or even some areas of the dark green color, that very muggy category. So still right here on that dividing line of not bad and getting into completely dry weather, not a lot of moisture to work with in the atmosphere. Here's a look at the humidity levels all across the southeast, not only in Georgia, but over into Alabama, into portions of South Carolina, up into North Carolina and Tennessee. We're continuing to see widespread areas of no color whatsoever. We do have a patch of dark green down here in southeast Georgia. I'm not too sure if that's accurate. That may just be a bit of a sensor reading just outside of St. Simons and getting over close to Brunswick, Georgia, because it's the only area of dark green that we see. And it just looks like maybe some more light green is present the farther south that you go in the state. But I do believe only areas in Florida are really swampy and holding on to that humidity right now. Here's a look at the winds and the wind gusts. Actually a steady breeze building into your forecast, coming in out of the east and the northeast. Sustained winds anywhere up to about 10 miles per hour. And if we get some of those yellow shades, we could have some occasional gusts that get maybe up to about 15 miles per hour, but we don't expect too much of a substantial breeze whatsoever. And this mainly the farther north that you travel. If you are heading out the door, say in Chris County, Dooley County, Pulaski, or Wilcox counties, still not seeing that blue shade as prominent. It is going to continue to maybe float a little bit down to the south and the southwest. But a light breeze, some pleasant feeling temperatures, nothing to complain about as we head close to the midday hour here at 11 a.m. So 78 degrees by the time we go into noon, and our meteogram has us peaking around 83 degrees throughout 2, 3, 4, and 5 o'clock later this afternoon. And then we'll begin the temperature decrease as we head closer to sunset. 81 degrees at 6 p.m. and then after sunset, which is just after 7 p.m. now, we are going to start to finally get some 70s back for maybe that walk outside of dinner as you go out to any dinner plans that you have with friends and family tonight. So yesterday's numbers, let's talk about them. We hit a low confirmed of 49 degrees. That is the lowest temperature we've seen so far in the fall season. In fact, it's the lowest temperature we've really seen dating back into the early spring months here. So it's been quite some time since we felt that much of a chill in the air. The previous low temperature that we had seen as of recently was actually on September 10th. So it was over a month ago, and that was 53 degrees. So we definitely have continued to feel that fall feeling in the mornings a little bit more as we transition into the middle of October. 83 degrees for a high temperature yesterday, 3 degrees above average of 80, and of course 49 is well below your average low of 55 degrees. Finally getting those morning low temperatures back down around average and even below average, something we haven't been talking about very recently, because your average low continues to tick down about a degree every couple of days. In fact, for today, it was down to 54 degrees, and we're going to continue to see that number get lower and lower as we head into the end of October, November, and December, those Burr months, obviously pretty appropriately named because we are starting to feel a bit more of a chill in the air. While 49 was one of the lowest numbers we've seen so far as of recently, still didn't even come close to this record low set back in 1917 of 37 degrees. And your record high was set back in 1969, 92 degrees. So we're actually closer to our record high temperature as opposed to our record low temperature. 83 degrees, yes, it was a bit of a warm afternoon, but take a look at that spread between the two numbers. That is a spread of 34 degrees. So giving you an idea about how different the morning time feels as opposed to the afternoon when you are heading home. In terms of precipitation, of course, we didn't see anything in the way of rain yesterday. Your departure of rain just over 3 inches, 3.15 inches above where we should be at this point in 2025 as a whole. Sunrise yesterday, 7:37. Sunset yesterday was at 7:04, continuing to see that sunset creep closer and closer to the 7 p.m. hour. In fact, our last 7 p.m. sunset is set to be tomorrow. We will have just under 11 and a half hours of daylight, 11 hours, 22 minutes, and 4 seconds of daylight to be exact. And then after that, we will see the sun set before 7 p.m. So 6:59 is set to be the sunset as we go into October 16th, and that number will continue to steadily get earlier, and then it will get an hour earlier once we go into the time change. But no need to worry about that for quite some time. That will happen on November 2nd. So we still have about 3 weeks until we hit that mark. Here's a look at today's forecast. Brisk morning transitioning into a clear blue sky afternoon. Not much to write home about. A very pleasant forecast. A northerly breeze from 5 to 10 miles per hour. Maybe some occasional gusts that get closer to 15 miles per hour in a couple of areas. But 84 for a high temperature. And when you compare it to average of 80 this time of year, that does seem like it's on the warmer side. And yes, it is going to be a warm afternoon, but it's still going to be a pleasant feel in the air when you factor in little to no humidity in the forecast. And speaking of little to no humidity, your satellite and radar picture, it is crystal clear here in central Georgia, and it should remain that way throughout the rest of today. In fact, clouds are very hard to come by all across the southeast, back over to the west in Alabama, maybe a few clouds over here along the coast of South Carolina, but that's all associated with those low pressure centers that continue to move up the Atlantic coast. And right now, the southeast just entering a very quiet and a very uneventful forecast over the next couple of days. So here's a look at future view. We have been throwing some pause points on it as of recently. Well, I elected not to do that today because there is nothing to talk about besides maybe a few high-level clouds here and there. It's nothing that's going to impact your forecast whatsoever. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, not seeing much in the way of cloud cover, just plenty of sunshine, no rain chances in the forecast. So let's talk about the numbers. Obviously, when we have a quiet weather stretch like this, we do give more focus to the numbers because that's what you want to know. Obviously, you can see plenty of sunshine, but you do want to know what those temperatures are as you walk out the door each and every morning and what those afternoon high temperatures are going to feel like as you're making your way home from work around 4 and 5 o'clock. So 84 for a high temperature today, continuing to see a bit of an upward trend with your morning lows. 54 to start out tomorrow morning, and then 56 as we kickstart Thursday morning. Your afternoon highs actually go the opposite direction. Whether you're 82 or 84 degrees in the afternoon, it's still feeling the same. So 84, yes, it might be the warmest of the next 3 days and a little bit warmer than yesterday. Overall, every day is going to feel a lot like it felt yesterday during that peak afternoon window. And these high temperatures we should only reach them for maybe about a 3 or 4 hour period each and every day. That 2 to 5 p.m. window is really looking to be the time that we actually get up into the low 80s. And then as we transition into around 6 to 7 o'clock, that's when we're going to start to see some of those cooler temperatures. We'll get those numbers to dip back into the 70s, and it will feel a lot more pleasant. So let's talk about the humidity levels. How long do we keep this drier air in the forecast, or do we have one day over the next 3 days that maybe has some feels like temperatures that are slightly warmer than the numbers that you do see? Well, it doesn't look like any of that's in store. Yes, you will see some fluctuation, maybe some light green that is scattered all about central Georgia, but our dew point temperatures still fluctuating between those upper 50s, those low 60s. That's still a very dry environment. But by the time we go into the overnight hours on Friday, really very early on Friday morning at 4 a.m., we're continuing to see that northeasterly breeze. So we could have a bit of a wedge set up that is going to reinforce the drier air that we're feeling all across central Georgia, push any of those faint areas of light green out of the forecast. And that's actually going to be courtesy of frontal boundary number 1 that we will be talking about. Now, this frontal boundary, what we like to refer to as those invisible frontal boundaries. It's not going to pass through, send us a continuous line of rain, maybe some thunderstorms. In fact, this frontal boundary is really just going to reinforce the drier air, and it may give us some slightly cooler temperatures, but we'll talk about why that maybe is as we go into Friday afternoon. So a steady warming trend with your morning lows up into Thursday, and then it looks like maybe some slightly cooler air, only a downtick of about 4 degrees, but 52 degrees as you start out Friday and Saturday mornings, just pushing those numbers back below average by a touch. But by the time we get into the weekend, I would expect this average low to at least be 53 degrees, maybe even 52 degrees by the time we roll into Saturday. So these numbers in the low 50s could be a lot closer to average than what they look like as of right now, a couple degrees below average. Afternoon high temperatures somewhere in the low 80s each of the next 5 days, with the exception of Friday. Now you may ask, okay, why is Friday just going to be slightly cooler? And I did mention that frontal boundary, that invisible front going to pass through and reinforce our drier air and maybe result in a bit of a downtick in those morning low temperatures as you start Friday and Saturday morning. I don't think that really translates to your afternoon high temperatures, and overall 79 compared to 84. Once again, still feeling virtually the same, maybe just not feeling the warmth of the sun as much during the afternoon time frame, but that's also going to be due to something else that I'll show you once we go over to the long range models after this. So your humidity day by day, it continues to hover right on the line of the comfortable and the very slightly humid box right here. But take a look at what happens as we go into Thursday and Friday, a steady downtick in the humidity values that will continue to go down all the way into Saturday afternoon. So Saturday, as long as we keep that really dry air in the forecast, things are looking good to go. It's going to be a pleasant feeling afternoon, and you shouldn't have much in the way of rain chances while the moisture content in the atmosphere is lower. But now we see an increase from Saturday into Sunday. Sunday is going to be the day that frontal boundary number 2 arrives. And obviously ahead of it, it's going to have more moisture present than any day throughout the work week so far, any day for the next 7 days, in fact. But take a look at how quick it dips back down. The frontal boundary that comes through on Sunday is going to give us another push of cooler and drier air as we go into the beginning of next week. But it is going to be a slightly humid atmosphere as we go into Sunday afternoon ahead of that next approaching frontal boundary. So let's go into the long range models. This is where there's a few more talking points. Number 1, more cloud cover present over the southeast corner of the United States going into Friday afternoon. So 5 p.m. on Friday, football Friday night, heading out to tailgate, heading out to the gridiron, wherever you are going to watch your favorite Central Georgia team square off under the Friday night lights. More cloud cover being present may just limit the warm up a tad bit. So that's why the high temperature goes down into the upper 70s. It's not too much of a difference, but maybe a downtick of at least a couple degrees where we get back below average throughout the heat of the day on Friday. Now let's go all the way to Saturday. It also looks like another great atmosphere for any outdoor plans. Maybe you're heading up 441, going up to Athens to watch that top 10 matchup between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Georgia Bulldogs. Maybe you're going up to Atlanta. Maybe you're heading down to the beach for a quick weekend trip. we can see signs of more active weather over to the west. So if you have any weekend travel plans, say over into Alabama and Mississippi throughout the day on Saturday, it's definitely a bit of a messier forecast, even the potential for some severe weather over in those portions of the country. But this is frontal boundary number 2 that I was talking about. More moisture ahead of it means it's going to produce fairly widespread rain as it does move across the eastern United States. It still doesn't look like it makes its presence known here in central Georgia until maybe we go into the overnight hours, and mainly just some lingering cloud cover ahead of it that is making its presence known first and foremost. But then we go all the way into Sunday morning. This is Sunday at 8 a.m. Pretty gloomy atmosphere that you're going to walk out the door, head to church to. But then this is where we're still seeing a bit of disagreement amongst these long-range models. So here's the GFS in green. You can see it's on the front half of the European, which is in the blue shades. Now, what time this frontal boundary comes through, we were talking about it yesterday, is going to really determine how heavy or how much heavy rain that we receive. Do we receive anything in the way of severe weather? We need this frontal boundary to come through during that peak afternoon window for maybe some heavier rain, some thunderstorms in the forecast. As of right now, none of that is in the cards, but you can see 8 a.m. It's right on our doorstep. So as we continue to go into the future, here's what that peak afternoon heating window looks like at 4 p.m. The European showing widespread rain chances all across the state of Georgia, but the GFS here in green breaks apart. We see this frontal boundary kind of part ways and kind of parts like the Red Sea. We can see plenty of green up here to the north of us, but then down to the south, there's also plenty of green down in the state of Florida. Here in the state of Georgia, it doesn't look like that rain really holds together much, but this is a lot better agreement on at least the timing of this frontal boundary than what we did see yesterday. I would plan on your rain chances to be during the second half of Sunday. So once we get a better idea, we can really pinpoint the exact hour by hour forecast as we go closer into the weekend, but it's still going to be quite a while until Future View gets Sunday within view. That's actually going to be Friday, so that's probably the day that you'll want to return to the forecast. Check out what things may look like if you have any plans for the end of your weekend on Sunday, but I would have more confidence right now in your rain chances being in the second half of Sunday, hopefully only dealing with a couple of sprinkle showers or just a gloomy atmosphere for the beginning of Sunday for, say, any church plans. So if we do go the European route, this would give us some more impressive rainfall totals. The GFS obviously wouldn't send much rain here into our neck of the woods. And this is Sunday evening. The European still trailing a bit behind the GFS and saying that some rain's going to hold on into the area in mainly East Georgia as we go into the nighttime hours. But both are very confident in this clearing out as we go throughout the day on Monday. Maybe a few clouds, maybe a few isolated sprinkles that are still left for Monday morning. But overall, I think your Monday afternoon going to be nice and crystal clear as this frontal boundary will once again give us another push of cooler and drier air for the beginning of the work week next week. And it looks like that pattern continues to dominate into next Tuesday. Starting out the work week next week, exactly how we started it out yesterday with minimal cloud cover, an abundance of sunshine, and some cooler temperatures, especially some low humidity in your forecast. And this is as far as the long-range models go Tuesday into 4 p.m. So here's a look at your Future View rainfall graphics. How much rain should you be expecting? Well, obviously the GFS right here, that was the one that had the rain splitting and not really being present over central Georgia here. Only looks like a couple tenths of an inch of rain that could be present. Obviously, the rainfall totals are a lot more impressive as you go back over to the west. But going the European route, which actually did have that line of rain holding together, it still looks like the rain gets lighter the farther east that it travels. Now, if we are to see a bit of an earlier entry with this frontal boundary, maybe some of those shades of gray will slide over towards the east. But we do have some pockets of that gray over us here in central Georgia, so maybe some isolated pockets that could get about an inch of rain, maybe even an inch and a half of rain. But the one location that we see just a couple tenths of an inch of rain here in the Macon area, but at least it would give everyone a little bit of rain at the very least because we desperately need that rain. We are continuing to look out for the latest update of the drought monitor, which we will get on Thursday morning, and we'll talk more about probably how those drought conditions are going to worsen over central Georgia. So we're still going to need a couple inches of rain to provide a substantial dent in some of those dry conditions or those drought conditions that have been present all over central Georgia for maybe about the past 3 or 4 drought monitors that we've continued to get. So hopefully this will do at least a little bit of a good job at maybe giving some of that ground a bit of hydration. But overall, this looks to be the only shot at rain that we have over the entire next week here in central Georgia. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that we can milk as much rainfall out of that frontal boundary as we can. And it may come at the cost of a few thunderstorms, even possibly severe weather. Wouldn't rule it out of the cards as of right now. We're not predicting that as of right now. But the more severe weather that you do have, the heavier rainfall rates that will be associated with some of those thunderstorms. So I think one blemish on your 7-day forecast would be a welcome trade-off for at least getting us out of some of the dry and drought conditions that have settled in. Now let's check in on the tropics. Tropical storm Lorenzo formed as of yesterday morning, and now we have the 11 a.m. update where we have seen a weakening trend with Lorenzo. Lorenzo actually had 60-mile-per-hour winds at 5 a.m. this morning. Those have gone down to 45 miles per hour. Pressure just above 1,000 millibars, so indicating that the pressure is obviously not below the 1,000 millibar mark, and obviously this isn't too strong of a storm right now. And 45-mile-per-hour winds, that's really starting to get into the lower end of tropical storm criteria. But Lorenzo is expected to continue to move up to the north and eventually curve up to the northeast over the next couple of days. Right now moving to the northwest at 15 miles per hour. But you see where it's located. It is smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's really at the halfway point between Cape Verde right here off the western African coast and then the Lesser Antilles, the Windward Islands, all of those areas in the Northeast Caribbean. It's really right now centered in that halfway point. Satellite imagery is really not even looking that impressive associated with Lorenzo. But we'll continue to watch it move up to the north and eventually to the northeast and continue to curve back out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. By the time we get into Friday at 9 a.m., 40-mile-per-hour winds, and then it shouldn't have too much more of a lifespan. And the update before this actually had Lorenzo taking a complete U-turn and just stalling out right here in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This is definitely the biggest fish storm I think we've seen so far in the tropic season, not impacting any land masses whatsoever, except for maybe increasing some of the surf and some of the rip currents that are over there in the Caribbean islands, but obviously not going to be too strong of impacts because you see how far away that system is from it, and it's not a very large system, so the wind field probably not spanning that far over to the west. That's hundreds of miles. We need a much larger storm and a much more defined center of circulation in order to have those impacts. So far in the Atlantic hurricane season, we have crossed out our fair share of names, 7 on that first column and 5 more on this next column for a grand total of 12 named storms so far. Crossing off Lorenzo means Melissa and Nestor are going to be the next 2 names if we are to get any more named storms. We're heading into that back half of hurricane season. Only about a month and a half left until we officially end it on November 30th. And typically this time of hurricane season, we start to see the frequency of tropical systems begin to go down. So in terms of the numbers, as of October 14th, remember your averages and what Colorado State here with the CSU column, this is what was forecasted by Colorado State, who normally does a pretty good job of predicting those actual numbers and does a pretty good job in terms of accuracy about what we typically see in a hurricane season. Well, 14 named storms, Colorado State forecasted an above average season in terms of that, of which 7 of those hurricanes that we typically see on average, 9 is what Colorado State forecasted, once again above average. And of the major hurricanes we typically see, 4 were forecasted by Colorado State. Here's your numbers so far that we've seen in 2025. I did just mention it, 12 named storms. So yes, we're pretty close to average, and it looks like we have a good chance at least matching this average number of 14 before the end of the season. I did say tropical activity starts to decrease this time of year, but doesn't completely go away. That will be November 30th that we don't have to talk about anything anymore. 4 of which have been hurricanes. So only 1/3 of the storms that have formed so far have gotten hurricane status, which means their winds have gotten up to 74 miles per hour or even greater. But the shocking thing is, while these numbers are below average so far and still well below what was forecasted by Colorado State, 3 of the 4 hurricanes that have formed have been major hurricanes, so Category 3 or greater, and 2 of those 3 major hurricanes that we've had have actually popped up to Category 5 status with Hurricane Aaron and Hurricane Humberto. But most of these storms have stayed out at sea, simply really been fish storms or only impacted coastal areas of the United States or many of the Caribbean islands, the Bahamas, Bermuda. Those have been locations we've been talking about quite frequently with some of the storms over the last couple of weeks. But most of them have generally stayed out at sea, which is not a bad thing whatsoever. And for more of a reason why a lot of those hurricanes have decided to stay out at sea, be sure you tune in later on this evening at 5 and 6 for Ainsley Parker's package, breaking that full scenario down. Here's a look at the 7-day forecast. Sunshine, 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 partly cloudy, and then finally we have a rain chance. I've still elected for the shower icon, but I have given those rain chances a bit of an uptick. It does look like more confidence that we'll at least see an increased coverage of rain, but just how hard that rain will be and the potential for severe weather are the things that we're still trying to fine tune. It does look like we see a bit of a cool down into Friday. Remember, Friday afternoon should be a little bit cooler just because we have more clouds that are blocking some sunshine, but I do think that you'll start to feel a slight decrease in your morning low temperatures starting out at 52 on Friday and Saturday mornings. As cloud cover moves in overnight Saturday into early Sunday morning, your morning low temperatures should see a bit of a bump up to 57 degrees. 80 degrees, that's if we get some sunshine on Sunday. It's all going to be dependent on the timing of that front moving through. And then we go into Monday, clearing conditions back out, morning low temperatures going back down closer to average, afternoon high temperatures in the upper 70s, and that's paired up with plenty of sunshine, giving you an idea that this front coming through on Sunday could actually be one of the more stronger ones and one of the more potent fronts that we've seen in terms of the cooler and drier air that does follow the passage of that frontal boundary. And maybe we can knock those numbers down a tad bit lower as we go into the beginning of the work week next week. I was seeing some models that were saying upper 40s as you walk out the door next Tuesday morning, but we still have a ways before we do get there. The main thing that you need to know is nothing impacting your afternoon or any outdoor plans that you have over the next couple of days. Going to be a great work week to maybe go out to the car wash and not have to run into one of those scattered sprinkles or spotty showers that really just wants to pop up whenever you do wash your car. But then things do get iffy towards the back half of your weekend, specifically just on Sunday. I think any plans that you have on Friday and Saturday, football games, tailgate parties, going out on a camping trip with your friends and family, it's looking all good to go. And then we'll start to feel some more fall-like weather as we begin the next work week, which is going to get into that really back half of October. And of course, what follows after that, we'll have Halloween coming up fairly shortly. And then we will start to get into the month of November, where we'll start talking about some fall foliage and definitely showcasing a lot more of your Weather Network photos. So as you start to see those leaves changing color, or maybe those leaves beginning to fall, be sure to submit all those photos that you can in our 13 WMAZ Weather Network, and I very well may show a couple of those as we go into your extended forecast day by day here at 11 a.m. every day on 13 WMAZ Plus. So that does it. Not much going on until we get to Sunday. We're continuing to fine-tune that forecast in terms of your rain chances and in terms of maybe how active the skies are going to be as we head into the end of the weekend. But until then, nothing to worry about, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.